story, so it looked like the FBI is subpoenaing the WNBA and the NBA. Information coming out about this whole NBA scandal and situation. The WNBA is at the front line of it all too, because they is connected to this league. Now, I am here to tell you, the FBI is letting it be known they want phone records, schedules, the whole shebang. Now, we know just a couple of days ago, it was reported that none other than Adam Silver had to meet with the committee to discuss this whole situation involved.
Federal indictments were announced involving current player Terry Rozier and current head coach Chauncey Billups. What was your initial reaction, and what have the last 36 hours been like for you?
My initial reaction was I was deeply disturbed. There's nothing more important to the league and its fans than the integrity of the competition. And so I had a pit in my stomach. It was very upsetting.
And Terry Rozier was allowed to keep playing after an NBA investigation ruled that there was no NBA rules violated. What do you make of that decision now amid the FBI's allegations against him?
So what happened was, because bets were placed through legalized legal betting companies, they picked up aberrational behavior around a particular game in March of 23. And so that was brought to our attention by the regulators and the betting companies. We then looked into that situation and were very transparent about it. And while there was that aberrational betting, we frankly couldn't find anything. Terry at the time cooperated. He gave the league office his phone. He sat down for an interview. And we ultimately concluded that there was insufficient evidence, despite that aberrational behavior, to move forward. We then worked directly with the law enforcement, as they said at the press conference, that the league has been cooperating. And so that was obviously over 2 years ago. So the federal government has subpoena power, can threaten to put people in jail, can do all kinds of things that a league office can't do. So we've been working with them since then. And of course, what they announced yesterday was an indictment. So 2.5 years later, he still hasn't been convicted of anything, in fairness to Terry. Obviously, it doesn't look good, but he's now been put on administrative leave. And so, there's a balance here of protecting people's rights and investigating. And as I said, we've been working with the government, and they have extraordinary powers that a league office.
Everything changed the moment federal agents stepped in. 1 minute, people thought the drama around professional basketball was just another headline. The next, the FBI was inside offices, requesting phone records, schedules, internal documents, and personal devices. And the shock hit even harder when reports confirmed that this wasn't just about the NBA. This storm had reached the WNBA, and league executives were scrambling behind the scenes like never before. What started as whispers about strange betting activity has escalated into a full-scale federal sweep, and the commissioner's phone records being pulled is only the beginning of a much bigger problem unraveling fast. Federal investigations don't move unless they have reason, and the fact that subpoenas were sent to both leagues immediately sent panic rippling through front offices. This isn't some rumor floating around online. These are government agencies stepping into the world of sports, demanding access to private communications, internal paperwork, and everything in between. The seriousness hit instantly. When people heard that multiple teams were involved, not just one, it became clear that whatever authorities discovered was far more widespread than anyone expected. And that's why the WNBA is suddenly bracing for impact, because once the FBI starts digging into one league, the domino effect is unavoidable. The Lakers being one of the first teams named was a shockwave by itself. Not because they're the only team under scrutiny, but because they're the most high-profile name caught in the early sweep. 2 staff members already surrendered their phones voluntarily. That alone set off alarms among fans who immediately started asking why cooperation was needed so quickly, why phones had to be turned in, and what investigators were specifically looking for inside those messages. When you hand over a device to federal agents, you're giving them everything: calls, texts, emails, deleted files. Nothing is hidden, and investigators are combing through every detail to see who knew what and who may have been involved in sharing information that never should have left a locked office. And that's the core of the investigation: inside information, not small talk or locker room gossip, private updates that could influence betting outcomes. Things like injury status before it becomes public, rotations, last minute lineup changes, internal game strategies, and even personal situations that might quietly impact how a player performs. To a bettor, that kind of information is worth serious money. Suddenly, a storyline that seemed exaggerated on social media is now sitting at the center of an FBI case involving potential financial wrongdoing. That's why this situation hit the WNBA instantly. If these kinds of details can be leaked in one league, investigators won't assume the other is immune. What really pushed this investigation into overdrive were the charges against active figures like Terry Rozier and head coach Chauncey Billups. These aren't fringe names. These are established figures whose involvement made people realize that this wasn't a tiny pocket of wrongdoing. It might stretch across multiple teams, departments, and possibly even league staff. And when congressional committees stepped in to ask why the NBA didn't report certain information earlier, everything got even more complicated. If investigators determined that the league had indications of wrongdoing but didn't share those details with the proper authorities, that opens the door to an entirely new set of problems that could take years to fix. Fans immediately noticed the ripple effect. Some pointed out that LeBron James hadn't been playing as much recently and wondered whether the chaos around his circle had anything to do with it. One of the individuals named in the investigation, Damon Jones, is directly connected to him. While no one is accusing LeBron of anything, the speculation naturally exploded online. It always does when big names are even slightly connected to a major investigation. People began digging, posting theories, guessing which teams might be next, and what investigators may discover once more devices and documents are examined. That level of online noise is already pressuring the leagues to respond faster than they want to. But here's the part people keep forgetting. The NBA can't compel anyone to hand over information. The FBI can. Federal investigators have tools the leagues simply don't. They can subpoena, they can demand testimony, and they can require access to electronic records. That's why Adam Silver suddenly found himself in the center of everything, answering uncomfortable questions on national television about what the league did or didn't know. It's not about whether he wanted to resolve the situation internally. Once federal agencies stepped in, the choice disappeared. Now the WNBA is officially on the radar. And the timing couldn't be worse. The league has been trying to build momentum after a season full of excitement, higher attendance, and new fans tuning in. But it's also been dealing with controversial officiating, questionable calls, and accusations of bias, none of which were ever proven, but the chatter never completely stopped. And when the FBI is already digging into gambling activity in the larger league, it's only a matter of time before investigators ask whether similar issues could be hidden in the smaller one. The WNBA's size doesn't protect it. In fact, a smaller league can sometimes make personal connections tighter and irregular activity harder to spot. Investigators are paying close attention to whether referees or staff could have been involved, not because anyone is pointing fingers at specific individuals yet, but because officiating has historically been one of the easiest entry points for manipulation. The infamous Tim Donaghy case is a reminder of how one person can alter the course of games without anyone noticing until it's too late. If something even remotely similar were happening today, the impact on public trust would be devastating. And right now, trust is the one thing the WNBA cannot afford to lose. Front offices know this. That's why so many teams have already begun turning over documents to league lawyers preemptively. They want to show cooperation. They want to avoid being seen as holding back information. They want to protect themselves before investigators start pulling files directly. But when fans see that level of urgency, they naturally start connecting dots. They start wondering which teams might be involved, which decisions suddenly look suspicious in hindsight, and why certain personnel changes happened so abruptly this season. The timing around the Dallas Wings' sudden coaching move raised eyebrows immediately. No one can say publicly whether it's linked to the investigation, but the timing alone made people question everything. This story didn't slowly leak out over time. It exploded. Within hours, it spread across major networks, social platforms, group chats, and sports shows. Everyone has a theory. Everyone has a name they think might get dragged into the investigation next. People are questioning game outcomes they watched months or even years ago, trying to figure out whether certain moments were coincidence or something more calculated. And because the investigation is still in its early stages, the speculation is only going to get louder. The impact on the WNBA could be huge. The commissioner will face questions she's never dealt with before. The league is already negotiating a new CBA, trying to stabilize financials and fighting to maintain positive momentum. Now there's a federal investigation looming over everything. Even if the WNBA ends up being cleared, the association with the scandal can still hurt. Fans need to believe games are real. They need to believe competitions are honest. If doubt creeps in, even for for a moment, rebuilding confidence becomes a long uphill battle. Players are feeling that pressure too. Many have spent years trying to elevate the league, grow the fan base, and shift public perception. Now, through no fault of their own, they're caught in the same cloud of suspicion spreading across the entire basketball world. Social media isn't helping either. Jokes, conspiracy theories, and speculation are filling comment sections everywhere. People are talking about who knew what, which games felt off, and which teams might be at risk. And once those conversations start, they rarely disappear quietly. The next few weeks will be defining. More subpoenas will go out, more names will surface, more devices will be turned in, and the pressure on both leagues will intensify as investigators move closer to identifying who was involved and how far the operation really went. For the WNBA, this is the worst possible moment for a crisis, and yet it's happening anyway. Now the question is how deep the investigation goes, and who comes out on the other side with their reputation still intact.